Thank you so much. I know we've really asked a lot of you so far tonight, and you've all stuck around, and it's only going to get harder right now. Because I'm going to ask you to use your ears with a precision that you're probably not used to using. Because musicians, we measure with our ears. So what does it mean to say that two notes are in tune? I'll wait till that stops, because that's out of tune. Can you slide the piano a little closer and put the lid up as well? Amazing that one person can move such a giant weight. So we measure with our ears, and it brings up the question, when are two notes in tune with each other? And my answer is a little bit slick. My answer is, you know it when you hear it. And so I want to talk to you about intonation today. Musicians also measure other things. We measure time without a chronometer, without a time measuring instrument. We do that with our mind, like the guy who bends spoons. We have to divide time into regular lengths, and it's really hard. And we sit in our studios all day helping our students, and some of them are back there, they can confirm this later, helping them divide an abstract period of time into more fine abstract periods of time. And it's hard. Additionally, we ask them to hear how high or low the note is that they're playing. We call that the pitch of the note. How high or low a note is the pitch. And we ask them to make it in tune. And they kind of have to figure that out, what it means. There are machines which show how high or low notes are, but really you have to do it with your ear. Now, you've all heard of A440. We'll hear one of those. That's an A440. It's vibrating at 400. Am I talking too loud, by the way? No. Okay. That note is vibrating at 440 cycles per second. And here's an A at 220. Sounds also like the same note. If you think about it, isn't that amazing that in our heads, those sound like the same note? Can you play one and then the other? Why should that sound like the same note? I can't answer that. But they do, right? Is there anybody here to whom that doesn't sound like different versions of the same note? Right, exactly. And so there's the physics of that is very well understood. It's been looked into for centuries. Galileo's father was very interested in this notion of vibration of notes, and it's quite well understood by many people who work in this building, and not so well understood by me. I enjoy the mystery of the fact that those notes, even though they're clearly different, actually we recognize them as different sort of iterations of the same name of pitch. Now, you probably know, and you have eyes so you can see from the shape of the piano, and you'll see from the trombone as well, that a certain physics principle applies that the longer the vibrating object, the lower the pitch. So in the case of the piano, it has this very sexy shape to it. It always has this shape in a grand piano with the curves. And the reason is that the lowest strings, which are on the left, are the longest, so they need a lot of room in the back. And the highest strings are very short. They're what, 3 inches long? Do that again. About 3 inches long. So it's very short up here, so you get that nice swivel shape to the piano. The trombone is a great instrument for demonstrations because Mark will show you a note in first position on the trombone, meaning that the slide is not out. And then he can go to second position, and third, and fourth, and so on. And by the way, the distance that each note is dropping, we call that a half step, or sometimes a semitone. So the piano, when you alternate as close as possible white notes and black notes, we get a sequence of half steps. Interestingly, a scale made all of half steps, we call that a chromatic scale. The English language has a horrendous paucity of words to describe sound. We have to borrow visual words, eye words, to talk about sound. So I'll say to my student, Kyle, who's sitting back there, can you get an image in your head of what that music should sound like? There should be a word soundage, a soundage of what it should sound like. We don't have very many words. So we have to call a scale with all the half steps in it a chromatic scale. That's a color scale. Terrible term, but that's all we've got. It's hard to talk about music. So now, we need to talk about intervals. Well, before we talk about intervals, let's talk about in tune. So let's switch sides. Mark's going to play an F, and I'm going to play an F. So we're highly trained musicians here, and the first thing we do when we hear the other guy play a note is we find it, and we match it. Now, we can do that on these instruments. Kit cannot find our F and match it because the piano is pre-tuned, and you're stuck with whatever the tuner did to it. I saw the tuner when I got here before the event tonight. This piano is freshly tuned. I asked the tuner, so how is the piano taking the tune? He said, well, this piano's tricky to get into tune. It's an old piano. I did the best I can, but it holds its tune pretty well. One of the problems with tuning pianos, you tune it, you can't, it's like doing the dishes. You can't say, I did the dishes last week. Why is there a sink full of dishes? It doesn't stay that way. The piano is the same. These instruments and violins and woodwinds are tunable. Many percussion instruments are also tunable, believe it or not. Even an instrument like a marimba, which is like a big xylophone with wooden bars. Imagine what would happen if you took a plane, the tool, a plane, and planed a couple of times one of those bars. It would change pitch. And in fact, marimbas are tunable by shaving off a little bit of wood off of the bars. It's kind of interesting, at least to me. So now what happens if Mark and I play an F, and then he starts going out of tune a little bit? Listen to what happens. What do you hear? Whoa, 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 whoa. What do you do when you hear that when you're playing back there? You change, right? We don't like that sound. Now, some contemporary music uses that sound, because when you come right down to it, if you open your mind up, you say, that's actually a pretty cool sound. Whoa, 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 whoa. It's amazing that that happens. We call that beats. And one of the ways that we tune is that we get rid of the beats. So we're going to get rid of the beats now. So why don't you start a little flat. You know it when you hear it, right? Playing the same note now. So we're using our ear to tune. Now we need to start talking. That's a unison, right? The same note. What about intervals? What's an interval? An interval, as Tulia was telling you, is like distance. It's the space between two notes. So we discussed half steps. Here's a half step. We can call that the interval of a half step. Same thing, right? So what about other intervals that are bigger? Well, we can go, instead of a half step, we'll have a whole step. That equals 2 half steps. This is turning into a math talk. We can have a third. A major third is 2 whole steps. So play F, G, A. And you hear that sound, that's called a major third. Here's a fifth. Count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to start by talking about fifths. Now it turns out, and we're going to talk about fifths and thirds, because when you have a third plus a fifth, you get a major chord. And that's something that's kind of easy to hear, relatively easy compared to other things, the intonation. If you take an interval like a major seventh, that's a little trickier to tune. So we're going to deal with the realm of just a major chord here. Play that again. Major chord. Okay, everyone's okay if we just call that a major chord? It's not too technical. Okay. So let's take the outer parts of a major chord first. The F and the C. Okay. Now, I'm going to ask Mark to play the A, the third. And I'm going to ask him to play it in tune. And then I'm going to tell you what he did. Play it loud, Kit. So you may not know it because to you that just sounds in tune. But what Mark has to do is to play that major third on the low side, actually quite a bit on the low side. And this is something that we do when we're playing. You're probably not aware of this unless you all play an instrument yourself, but we are constantly fiddling around with the intonation, with how high or low we're playing to make it sound really in tune. And you're going to see in a minute why the piece that we chose for the performance, which is going to happen as soon as I stop talking at you, is the well-tempered clavier, because this has to do with intonation. So let's hear that again, that fifth, and then the third. Now you play the third. So the third here, play them against each other. Don't match them, okay? Can you hear that they're not the same? There, you got it, right? There, he moved the slide in and it came up, now he moves it down. Right, so believe it or not, a third that sounds really good, like the first one that Mark played, is not the same as the one that the piano played, right? And in fact, Mark can play a better fifth than the piano can play. It turns out, and if you ask any physicist, he or she will tell you that a fifth, in order to be really in tune, has to be a little bit extra wide. So pity us poor musicians. As we're playing, we have to know which part of the chord we're playing. If we're playing the fifth, we have to play it a little high. If we're playing the third, we have to play it quite a bit low. Can you play the C and you play the F, and we'll see if we can get a better fifth? And yours? Just slightly different. I told you this was going to be hard. There, you can hear it there a little better. Okay, so now, soon we're going to get to tuning the piano, which is kind of our topic. I want to do a little experiment here, because I told you that the thirds that are in tune have to be quite small. So what I want to do, we're going to do a little kind of a Jacob's ladder. We're going to start with our F, a low F, and don't do it yet because I got to chatter first. So here's what's going to happen. Mark is going to match that F. I'm going to play a third above it, which happens to be an A. It's going to have to be low because it's a major third. I want it in tune. So we're going to have a squeezed major third. Now I'm going to hold that. Mark's going to play a major third above that. That's going to be squeezed. That note will be a C sharp. Now, who's holding it now? You're holding it. And I'm going to move up to an F, and then he's going to move up to an A, and then we're going to test that against the piano's A. And theoretically, we should be a lot lower than the piano. And if we're not, it's because we got our piano ears on, right? And not our brass ears. So we start with F. Okay. It's awful, right? It's awful. And in fact, there you go. Turn sideways and show the difference in the slide. So he's got a full inch of slide out that he wouldn't have if he were matching the piano. Now, think about this. You are a piano tuner, okay? And you say, I've got 88 keys, and the king told me to put them in tune. So I know what a third should sound like, so I'm going to start with a C. And then I'm going to tune an E. That's a third away, and I know what that should sound like. And then I'm going to tune my G sharp, and then I'm going to tune my C. And then you play those two C's together, and they're not in tune, and not even close. It turns out we did the math, and after 10 jumps of the interval of a third, you're a full half step lower than the piano would be. So let's go with a low F and go up 10. So here's up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Up there, you'd instead be playing that note. So you can see the degree to which not only as we play and match each other and try to make things in tune that we have to correct and change, but you can also see how hard it would be to tune the piano. Now imagine you say, okay, I'm going to get smart and I'm going to tune the fifths instead. So as it turns out, if you keep going up a fifth, eventually you get back home. That's called the circle of fifths. Why don't we do that from the very bottom? Can we make it? And there we are. We just barely make it. Through the length of the keyboard, we can make it from low C up to high C. So we tune all those fifths, and then we find out that our highest note's actually a D instead of a C. So how do you do this? How do you actually tune a piano? And now you could very easily tune a piano to play really nicely in C major. It would sound fantastic. You'd have the E be very low, the G be a little high, and you'd regulate everything so that when you're playing in the key of C major, it would be great. But now you have a piece that's in the key of A major. So here's a C major chord. Here's an A major chord. Now can you play those emphasizing the E? So here's the C major chord. Here's the A major chord. In one of those keys, the first one, the E is the third. Needs to be played low. In the other key, E is the fifth. Needs to be played high. So if you tune the piano to play well in C major, it's going to sound terrible in A major. And as you saw from our initial experiment, having Mark place the third, in fact, this piano is out of tune. I would go so far as to say that it is beautifully out of tune because it was just tuned. Okay? So, what is well-tempering? Why did Bach write this giant piece, the well-tempered clavier? Well, first of all, what's a clavier? That means keyboard. Okay? That's all clavier is. What is well-tempering? Well-tempering is taking a keyboard and making it so that it can play in every key. It is a perfect compromise. No note is in tune. Or maybe your starting note is in tune, and everything else is equally out of tune. And what's interesting is the distances are small enough that we can accept the piano as being in tune. So probably normally when you listen to a piano, unless it's your home piano which hasn't been tuned in 24 years, but a freshly tuned piano sounds relatively in tune. And that is thanks, and now it's a whole different lecture to tell you how to tune a piano to well temper it. But why don't we just, since we need to move on to the music before everyone fades, let's say that there is an art and skill to figuring out how to exactly put your piano out of tune so that it can play in tune, sort of, in any key. And Christopher Taylor has chosen 4 selections from the well-tempered clavier that are in different keys, in fact, so different that if this piano were not well-tempered, if it were tuned for one key, the other pieces would sound absolutely horrendous, so that you would not accept them. But instead, not only will you accept them, but you will be absolutely delighted to hear this performance. So thank you for playing for us. Thank you to the scientists. Thank you, Mark Hetzler. Thank you all for coming. Please come back on March 10th. And in the meantime, enjoy this performance and join us for dessert afterwards. And please talk to all of us. May 10th. What did I say? March 10th. May 10th. Okay. Thank you so much.
As Dan said, Bach was trying a new trick, experimenting with keys that in the earlier tuning systems would have been completely impossible. So in particular, the second one of these in G sharp minor, I believe this is the first piece ever written in that key. And even today, it's still a very rare key. And it has, if you have perfect pitch, it has a very distinctive and unusual sound. Even if you don't, I think you can sort of see that there's something unusual about the personality of the piece. In addition to being a great experiment in exploiting a new system of tuning, the well-tempered clavier, of course, is culmination of the art form of the fugue, which has been developing for a couple of hundred years in Bach. And the distinctive thing about a fugue is that it has a theme at the beginning called the subject that starts as sort of a single melody, and then the other voices build in and start interacting with that first voice that you heard at the beginning. And it combines with itself in all sorts of fun ways. That's pretty much all there is to the form of the fugue. So other than that, it's very free. And each one of the fugues in the Welsh and the Fugue is very different. And then the preludes are just sort of getting you warmed up for those, these rather academic and intellectually challenging fugues. So they tend to be a little lighter and are equally or even more varied in personality. So I'll explore then 4 keys, adjacent members of the first book of Bach's Immortal Welsh.